this episode. So this week, the name on the marquee has got to be Johnny Eblen, who this past weekend at the Kia Forum in Inglewood, California at Bellator 290, Bader versus Fedor 2. That's right. That was the main event. Johnny Eblen was in the co-main, and he is on our marquee. He defeated Anatoly Tokov by unanimous decision. The scorecards read 50-45, 49-46, and 49-46. And Eblen looked great defending his middleweight belt. Mark, let me throw it over to you first. What were your impressions of Johnny Eblen getting it done, defending his title?
Johnny Eblen is good at fighting. He knows it. Gegard and now Anatoly Tokov know it, and the world is starting to know it. He beat Anatoly Tokov clearly in this fight. I leaned Tokov's way in round 1, but it was already swinging by round 2, and it went how I thought it would, which is that as the fight went on, Eblen would find more and more success, particularly with the wrestling, and that's exactly what happened, and he completely nullified a very dangerous finisher in Tokov. He beat him everywhere the fight went. He had Tokov looking glacially slow, I thought, which may have been more of a Tokov thing. I don't know, but I thought he looked really slow in there at times. But Eblen is a hell of an athlete, and he is showing you with every fight how well-rounded he is. You really can't look past any part of his game. And he's the hottest name in Bellator at the moment. Not too long ago, it was AJ McKee, right? But now you have a lot of people who are talking about Johnny Eblen and talking about how he stacks up against the top 5 in the UFC. And his name is everywhere. This guy went from fighting Colin Huckbody a year ago to getting picked by people to beat UFC champions today. So this has been one hell of a rise for Johnny Eblen. And frankly, he deserves it because he's been great.
Omar, let's get you in here. What was your reaction to Johnny Eblen's big win this past weekend for Bellator 290?
Yeah, man, I'm sold on him. I was, the Gegard Mousasi was one of those, holy shit, and then you start thinking, well, I wonder if Gegard finally hit that age gap, whatever. But like Tokov is an absolute animal, and the pace that was in that fight, and I think that's where Johnny lives in that pace, and it kills people. It absolutely ruins people. And the one thing I was noticing too was even when they were, squaring off against each other and moving around and kind of feeling the movement out of each other, I noticed Tokov kind of trying to copy or ends up mimicking the pace that Johnny Eblen was also trying to put on him, just in the feints and the movement and things like that. Mm-hmm. A lot of times that's not a great thing to do because you end up falling into their rhythm, which is kind of the opposite of really what you'd like to do, right? You want to create your own rhythm. You want your rhythm to take over. And a lot of times guys will actually go slower sometimes, and you'll see fighters kind of mimic that slowness and go, it's a weird little thing. But in this case, Eblen was able to speed up, feinting forward, moving, you know what I mean? And Tokov was mimicking a lot of that, but he looked so much more uncomfortable doing so. And I think over time, he just got dragged into deeper and deeper waters as it went through. And Eblen's ability to keep up the pace for 5 rounds like that is terrifying. And I think that's what makes him, I think that's where the conversation really comes into play. Because if you ask me today, do I think Adesanya beats Eblen? I'd say there's an argument to be made that Eblen outworks Adesanya. I can't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if Adesanya could definitely catch him because Eblen definitely gets touched. But the work rate and the success that Eblen has doing what he does and playing that game is crazy. He's very, very good, man. And I do think right now it would be a disservice to the middleweights of the world to not put Eblen at the top of the heap and really start talking about where he would stack up.
Mark, where do you... Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. No, you go ahead. I think you're going to say it.
I was going to change the subject to where do these guys go from here?
I was just going to say about Eblen. I'm comfortable with having him mentioned of, like, could he hang with the UFC's top 5? I'm not ready to come out and say, like, I think he'd beat Izzy, I think he'd beat Pereira, so on and so on. I get it, but especially with Pereira, I get it, the way the matchup is, that he could potentially take down Pereira over and over again. If he beats Gegard again and looks as good, I think maybe I'll start to be more open to it, but I need a little more than 2 fights to get there. But the fact that he has even put himself in these type of conversations through really only 2 fights is pretty wild.
Yeah.
It's the performances. It's the quality of the performances. This is not like, for example, the Danny Sabatello fight, right? Where you kind of laid on Rafion Stotts for a majority of that fight, didn't really do too much. We kind of argued about control versus damage, and we had a whole back and forth about it. That's not the game of Johnny Eblen. Johnny Eblen is forward, forward, forward. If he takes you down, he's trying to crack you. He's trying to move forward. He's trying to advance. Like, Johnny Eblen is like, for lack of a better term, he really is like an Energizer Bunny.
Yeah.
He's continuously moving. And again, these things Pereira could absolutely knock out Johnny Eblen. Like I'm not delusional, right? Like if Johnny Eblen gets touched by Alex Pereira on that chin, he can go down 100%. But there's also a world where I do believe Johnny Eblen could get in on a leg, take him down, and work that pressure. I mean, we've seen Pereira gas later on into the round. I've yet to see Johnny Eblen gas, literally.
Yeah, and you could tell looking at Tokov coming out for the 5th round.
He was done.
He was like,
done.
There's nothing I can do right now. I'm just going to go out here and get outworked for 5 more minutes. Like, that's literally what was happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could see the change in demeanor, too, as the fight went on. Because if we're being honest, man, Tokov, there were a lot of... I think the exchanges that get in a fighter's heads are the ones where they think they're going to get it, and then they don't. Mm-hmm. And it continuously fucks with them over time, especially for somebody like Eblen, where I feel like Tokov in a normal situation, his explosions, his rolls to get out of bad situations probably work like 98% of the time. And then here comes this fucking guy who can stop that. And so now all of the things that Tokov relies on, all the different escapes that he's comfortable with, the explosion that his muscles usually afford him, all of that stuff, Eblen is now countering. And so it's like, dude, like what do I have to do? What can I do? And after 3-4 rounds, you're talking 20 minutes of the bullshit. It wears, man. It absolutely wears. And the gas tank doesn't get any better from there.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Let's talk about where these guys go from here. Mark, let's start with the loser, Anatoly Tokov. Where does he go from here?
I think you throw him and John Salter in there. Again, we've had this conversation before. Bellator's middleweight division is not terribly deep. There are some more names who are sort of popping up at this point now. But still, I feel like it's kind of accepted that John Salter is like that next guy aside from these two and Gegard. Mm-hmm. And we have not seen Tokov and John Salter matched up, so I think that's where I would go with him.
Okay. Omar, let me throw it over to you. What is next for Johnny Eblen looking at the landscape of the Bellator middleweight division?
I think those, like I usually talk about when it comes to Bellator, there's not, I feel like, a ton of room for interpretation with things. Mm-hmm. I mean, Eblen at this point, that was what, his first title defense now?
Correct.
Right? Yeah. And so for me, like Mark was talking about, I think the Gegard Mousasi thing, even though I know he went with John Salter, but the Gegard Mousasi thing, I think, is one that I still want to see again. I do want to see if he can put that performance on again, because the first performance was dominant, and it wasn't even one of those, wow, I can't believe he did it. It was like, holy shit, I can't believe that's how he beat Gegard Mousasi.
Yeah, to be clear, I thought you asked me for Tokov. I was saying Salter for Tokov.
Oh, I was
asking,
talking about Eblen.
I asked you about Tokov. I asked him about Eblen.
Yeah, okay. Because Omar said I picked Salter for Eblen, but that's not what I would do for Eblen. I agree with Omar for Eblen.
Yes.
Mousasi is booked against Fabian Edwards. I want to say in like April or something around there. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm assuming they're probably looking at that as a number one contender fight. Edwards is a bit random, but he just beat Machida, so I guess he's kind of rising at this point. So my guess is whoever wins that fight probably gets Eblen, but I would think it's going to be that would be another shock if Gegard ever lost that one. So I would hope we're going to be looking at Eblen and Gegard too here in the somewhat near future.
Yeah.